Okay. Well, hi, I'm John Orlowski. Here we are in my worth and along the beautiful Nechako River. And this is my garden, and this is my two garlic beds. I really like growing garlic. I think it's a wonderful crop for the north. And I was asked, how do you know when it is that you would harvest garlic? I think if you go online, what they'll say is you want to look and see when the lower leaves start drying out. I don't find that to be a good indicator for here. What I look for, as you can see, that these are what we call hardneck garlic, and this is a garlic scape. And when the scapes first come out, they twist in like a little pigtail, and then this time of year they straighten up, and you can see that they're straightening up. That's when I start looking to see if the garlic was ready for harvest yet. So why don't we harvest one and take a look at it and see what criteria we use to see if it's ready for harvest or not. See, so this garlic's looking pretty good. What I'm looking for is to see is that the bulb wrappers, the leaves around the bulb, are getting kind of papery. Before they're ready, the wrappers will be, I call them fleshy or have a lot of substance to them. And what you want is to be them a little bit like this. I'll probably leave these garlic in this week because it's supposed to be warm and sunny the rest of this week, and I'll most likely be harvesting it next weekend. But so this is looking pretty good for harvest, and that's basically what I do. I go along with my shovel or my trowel. I kind of loosen the earth, pry it up, and then just pull the garlic out of the soil. My soil's pretty easy to work with. I use a lot of compost, and what I do is in my rotation is my garlic goes in after my potatoes. So once I've harvested the potatoes, the soil of course is all worked up at that point then, and then it's ready for the garlic to be planted. This garlic would have been planted either in the second half of September or the first half of October last year. And I start looking, like the scapes start straightening out, and I start thinking about harvest the last week of July or the first week of August, and it just kind of depends on the season when that is. The vast majority of what I grow, because you can see by the scapes, is hardneck garlic. Hardneck garlic puts out the scape, and it's pretty hard, and so when you dry it, you can't braid it very easily. Although I've seen it braided on Salt Spring Island, and I think they must have forearms, like, and they can crush rocks with their bare hands or something like that. I've tried braiding and it doesn't work for me. So mostly what we grow are hardnecks, and the hardnecks tend to be more winter hardy, which is one reason we grow them, which is good. But I also grow softnecks, and these are softnecks. You see, they don't put up a scape. They might put up bulbils at the top, and we'll talk about bulbils in a little bit. And softnecks, when you harvest them, those are the ones that you can braid, so if you see a braid. And most of the garlic that you find in the supermarket, if you're just buying, generic garlic, is going to be softneck. The bulbs tend to have a lot more cloves, whereas the hardneck garlics have maybe less cloves per bulb as a rule. Okay, well, another thing is this time of year, it's a little hard to tell, but there are basically, among the hardneck kind of garlics, there are like 4 basic categories of hardnecks. And so in this bed, a lot of these are what they call rocambole garlics. And rocamboles supposedly have the most authentic garlic flavor. And so I planted a bunch of rocamboles. And so you can see these tend to be a little lower. They tend to be a little later to put their scapes out. The scapes are slightly maybe different shape than the others, but I can't really tell that. But they don't store as well as the others, but you want them for the flavor. So those are the first garlics that I eat. And then when I'm done with the rocamboles, I move on to the others. So there are marbled purple garlics, purple stripe garlics, and then porcelain garlics. And the porcelains are the ones I find seem to store the best. I'm still eating porcelains that I harvested last I'm down to my last bulb of porcelains I harvested last July or last August. It was pretty wet, so it was probably late last year. And generally those you'll get 4 cloves in a bulb, and the cloves will be, you know, huge. They're bigger than my thumb, and so you have to like even chop them to get them into the garlics, you know, compressor. But they've got good flavor, and they tend to, if you treat them right, store well. Storing is the whole thing for me. I grow everything for storability because I don't want to have to buy crappy imported garlic from the supermarket. I find it's tasteless. I don't know how it's grown. You know, Canada imports something north of 85% of the garlic that we use, and really, we should be exporting quality garlic to the world at a premium price, not buying cheap, crappy garlic that's imported from somewhere else. But that's just me. So how I plant my garlic, and again, I'm all about storability. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm not going to harvest it and eat it right away. I want something I know is going to store over time. But I also keep track of what my garlic is, and maybe because I'm a horticulturalist and that's just, you know, working in a lab kind of thing. So what you have here is groups of 3. So I plant 1 garlic bulb, and you can see 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That will be all the same kind of garlic. I take my shovel, I dig a trench, probably 15 centimeters deep. In the bottom of that trench, now we're talking about this is going to be late September, early October, kind of depending on the moon. And then in that trench, I distribute my mixture of kelp and maybe bone meal, something for nitrogen, like I've been using feather meal or blood meal, those kind of things, kind of organic fertilizers that will take a while to break down. And I dig that into the bottom of that trench. I go along and dig it in. So then the bottom is, you know, and then I kind of smooth it out, and the bottom is nice and soft then. Then I take my cloves, my bulb, break it apart into cloves, and then plant the cloves. So I'll plant 1, and then 2, and then 1, wanting to get, and you can see here, whatever that is, you know, it's, again, it's probably between 10 and 15 centimeters apart, right? Because I want them to have plenty of room so they can grow as big as they can. And then that whole trench will be somewhere between 15 and 20 plants. And that will be 1. And then I put in labels at each end, because sometimes the crows, like, so this is Puss Lynch. It's 2nd year from bulbils. I think I'd gotten it as bulbas and I'm growing it. So you see it's grown really well for me in 2 years. And we'll talk about bulbils in a little bit, but that's what is in these are not true garlic seed. Is there are little, it's not quite ripe yet, but these little things are what's called bulbils. And so it's not the result of fertilization, pollinization and fertilization and a mixing of, you know, genetic material. This is all identical to the mother genetic material. So it's, then you can plant these, and we'll show you some plants that I've done this, or these are plants that are 2 years from planting bulbils that look like this and growing them. So here I wanted to explain the bulbils. So these are from last year. These are red chesnocks, and so when they're dried, and you can see that the actual bulbils are, you know, maybe the size of a grain of rice, right? Or they can be as big as, these are Puss Lynch, which will be similar to those plants that I showed you. See, and they have a much larger bulbil, and usually you'll get a lot faster growth out of bulbils this size than the small ones. Here are plants that I pulled today. These were a year old, and they were planted from the red chestnut sized bulbils, the rice sized ones, and they're basically what we call rounds. It's not really the bulb isn't really a clove, it's just one solid bulb, and you see that's fairly small. But then you could plant that again in the fall, and then next year have small cloves and probably the year after that you'll have medium to normal sized cloves. I usually give it 3 years from bulbil to being part of my regular garden plan. These, on the other hand, are a year old. You can see that this had much larger bulbils, again, so like this size. And in 1 year, you're getting small cloves. You know, I don't know if you can tell, but you know, they're actually divided, the bulb is divided into cloves, right? So it's a small bulb, but it's nonetheless, it's a real bulb, and it, you know, you could eat it, or you could, again, separate it when you go to plant these, and next year you would probably get, you know, a medium normal sized bulb out of it. Supposedly, if you start from bulbils and you're selecting the biggest ones, and you're selecting the ones that are most adapted to your care, right? Because everybody's going to grow them a little bit different. And so you could theoretically be leaving diseases behind if there were any diseases in your crop. They seem to be better adapted. I'm happier with my plants that I've grown from bulbils, you know, down the road after they've matured, than I am necessarily with plants that come from somewhere else and then I plant them in my garden. I have not done any kind of scientific testing, but my sense is they're bigger and better adapted to my care, right? So, and then otherwise, why would you go through the hassle of, you know, starting from bulbils and waiting 2 or 3 years to have a crop, right? And maybe I'm just crazy. So the question comes, why don't I cut my scapes? And I do cut some of my scapes, and I use them for, I add them to pesto and stuff like that. But we don't cut a lot of the scapes. And there's a feeling, it's not scientific, you only see it mentioned once in a while, that perhaps if you cure your garlic with the scapes still on it, that it lasts longer than if you cut the scapes. The argument for cutting the scapes, besides eating them, which is a great argument for cutting them, is that perhaps instead of putting that energy into growing bulbils, the energy will go into the bulb and you'll get a bigger bulb. I'm just like, well, just grow more garlic. I probably have 400 garlic bulbs here, you know, so I don't necessarily need bigger ones for more quantity. As I said before, or sometime, I'm really all about storage so that I don't have to buy garlic in the spring. And so if indeed it's true that leaving the scapes on when you cure them, and curing is really critical for storage, that I get a little bit of extra storage out of them, so that, like I said, I'm still eating garlic now from last summer, then I'd leave the scapes on. Okay, so this is my garlic that I harvested probably 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. As you can see, these are all hardneck garlics, and I wait for the scape to straighten out, like you can see here, and that's about the time when I harvest. So I harvest them. Each one of these groups of garlic is a different variety. I tie them, as you can see. I have the label on them, and then I hang them up to dry. This is out of the sun, really good airflow, and I'll leave them here now. Today's August 23rd. I'm going to plant probably the last week of September. Depending on the weather and what's going on in your life, pretty much any time between the middle of September and the middle of October is the time to plant around here. Just so happens that the last week of September, if you plant by the moon, is the best week in that time period. So I'm a little crazy that way. So you can see as they've dried out, the wrappers have kind of gotten papery. You know, I'll clean these up. So what I'll do in September is I'll probably take 4 or 5 of the largest bulbs, and I'll split those apart for replanting. And then the rest of them I'll clean up, cut back, and I'll save those for eating. Some of these, as you can see here, where the wrappers have broken, so it's a little late for harvesting, I'll probably won't replant those. I'll probably those will be the first ones that I eat. The ones I'm eating now are like these, where the wrappers have broken. I worry about soil getting in or something like that, so they won't store as well. And the other reason I won't replant them, although you could replant them, I don't want to be encouraging my garlic to get ahead of me, to be earlier than the way I care for it. So if I leave those and eat those and save the ones where the wrappers are nice and tight, I'm perpetuating garlic that responds to how I care for it. So that's why I do that.